Hey guys, welcome to the video. Salt here. Today we're going to be going over the melee weapon, the Ack Brunt Incarnon. But before we start, let's go over our commenter board. Our first and top commenter of the last video was Silver44. And our recent channel supporters are WhoopDeWham, Nice Bear, and Colonel06. Thank you so much for your support. Unique and interesting things about the Ack Brunt Incarnon is that when it's in its Incarnon form, on aerial and slide attacks, it's going to shoot out a Spectral axe. Those Spectral axes deal IPS damage and explode for heat and impact in a 5-meter radius. The heat that's caused will also mix with other elements that you put on the weapon. Also, while it's in its Incarnon form, you get plus 100% melee damage, plus 20% sprint speed, and plus 20% to your bullet jump. And if we go into the Ack Brunt here, there's a few more unique things where it has a unique trait where blocking absorbs up to 4 hits of elemental damage and applies 17.5% of that damage to the next attack. So when that's fully stacked, I believe that's about 70% of that damage to the next attack. This is nice, but it does require you to be purposely sitting out there blocking, so it's not something you're going to do very often. The other thing that's interesting with the Ack Brunt is it does have a special augment that I'll try to bring up here, Ack Brunt, and it's called Electromagnetic Shielding. This is a really weird one. While blocking, redirect 50% of damage taken by allies within 12 meters to yourself. This is kind of a novelty niche augment that probably won't make it on a serious build, but you could probably do some cool wacky things with it. But again, it's not going to make it onto our builds today. I just kind of wanted to show that off though. Now I have two different builds for you today for the Ack Brunt. I have the main build, which is just your typical max DPS build. It gets built out like pretty much every other melee influence build in the game. And I would actually say you should not play the Ack Brunt in this max DPS build. And that's because if you look at the Ack Brunt stats, if you go down to its Incarnon form, you know, it's got good crit damage, it's got good crit chance, although there are Incarnons that have better crit chance. There's Incarnons that have better crit damage, and the status chance is actually not really that great on the Ack Brunt Incarnon. So when you're looking for a melee weapon to just do max DPS, there's going to be a lot of other weapons that are better than the Ack Brunt. And that's why I don't really suggest to use the Ack Brunt in this main max damage configuration. I'll still go over it just in case this is like, for some reason, the only melee weapon you have, but I think you should instead be using the switch build here. And this is really the real power of the Ack Brunt, and it comes because of one of the evolutions of the Ack Brunt. We go back here, and we look at this third slot here. There's an evolution choice in the middle. It's called Abiding Hold. Combo timer pauses when weapon is holstered. So what that means is that most of the time on ranged focused builds or on ability focused builds, like maybe a Protea who's more ability focused or a Warframe that's just more of a gun frame, most of the time you have really weak melee weapons, and that's because your melee weapons don't really get to maintain their 12 times combo. But with weapons like the Ack Brunt, there's a few other weapons that are like this, but weapons like the Ack Brunt, they have these effects that pause their combo timer, and so that allows them to pretty much stay at high combos, 12 times even if you can get that high initially, pretty much all the time. So on a ranged focused build or on an ability frame focused build where you're only whipping out your melee to deal with like acolytes or demolists or other like kind of heavy like mini boss type enemies, this is where the Ack Brunt really shines. And so again, I really would suggest you use the second build I'm going to showcase today. Okay, let's go over our first max DPS build. This is going to be the build if you're building out a Warframe that is melee specific. She's always going to have her melee weapons out. You're never going to put them away. You're just going to run around whacking things the entire game. And if that's the case, yeah, you should use this first main build. Again, I would argue that there's probably better weapons than the Ack Brunt if that's your intention, but whatever, we'll go over this anyway. So we have Voltaic Strike as the 60/60 electric mod. This is going to be used to help trigger melee influence, which is on a melee electricity status, 20% chance for elemental melee status effects to apply to enemies within 20 meters. Galvanized Steel for critical chance and critical damage. Organ Shatter for critical damage. Gladiator Might for critical chance and critical damage. Condition Overload for flat damage per unique status affecting the target. Berserker Fury for 70% attack speed. Blood Rush for 440% crit chance. Weeping Wounds for 440% status chance. When it comes to the stance slot, Final Harbinger is much better than 11th Storm. Its combos produce more force slashes than 11th Storms does, and even the forward light, the one that doesn't produce any force slash for either of the stances here, Final Harbinger does more damage on the forward light as well. So pretty clear winner that Final Harbinger is the better one. In the Tennokai slot, we're picking Disciple's Merit. This enables a Tennokai Tennokai opportunities occur every 4 melee hits instead of at random, so it's a very consistent thing. And the Arcane we already went over. Okay, now let's go over the second build, which I call a switch build, or I personally like to call the whip it out build, because this build is better for Warframes that actually are not melee focused. They're more range or ability focused, and the only time you whip out your melee weapon is to deal with heavy, like mini bosses, like Acolytes, Demolist, things like that. And in that case, this is the best build for you here. And I think this is really where the Ack Brunt shines. So let's get into it. In the first slot, this is going to be dependent on what you want to make when you slide attack. Remember, when you're in your Incarnon and you slide attack, it's going to throw out a heat proc. That heat proc on testing, it seems like it's forced. I couldn't find information that confirmed 100% that it's forced, but it seems like it's forced because it happened every single time. And if we look, the status chance is really low. So it really shouldn't happen every single time. So I believe that that's forced, and it mixes with the element that you have on your weapon. And that is also seems like it's forced. And so, you're using this weapon to deal with mini bosses. So what elements are the best versus mini bosses? If you only had one slot to play with and it's going to mix with heat, what would you do? Well, there's really two things that I think are kind of competing for the best. There's gas, and that's why I have toxic here. So the toxic will mix with the gas. It's going to, or mix with the heat, make gas, and now you have a gas cloud that just sits there while you're fighting the Acolyte or whatever mini boss you're going up against. And then the other option is actually just to straight up use the heat 60/60 and just bank on heat by itself. I know it's heat plus heat, it still makes heat, but heat is really good against mini bosses too because it acts as kind of like a partial armor strip. So both of those are really good options. You can kind of make that decision yourself if you want to go with the 60/60 toxic, which will eventually make gas, or if you just want to go with the 60/60 heat, that'll just keep it as heat. In the next slot, we have Galvanized Steel for critical chance and critical damage, Organ Shatter for critical damage, Gladiator Might for critical chance, critical damage, Condition Overload for flat damage per unique status affecting the target. In the next slot here, where we had Berserker Fury before, remember Berserker Fury is 70% attack speed, but only after you kill 2 things. Well, if you're this specific build, you're really just whipping it out to deal with mini bosses. There's not always going to be trash there for you to stack up Berserker Fury. So Prime Fury is the best option, but it's a login reward, and it's probably one of the worst login rewards you could be picking. So a lot of people are probably not going to have Prime Fury. This is a 55% attack speed, but there's another attack speed mod that's pretty much as good as Prime Fury, really. Let's take a look at it here. It's called Quickening. So instead of 55 attack speed, this is only 40, but you get plus 20% combo count chance, which is also kind of nice. So if you don't have Prime Fury, which a lot of people probably won't, go ahead and plop Quickening there, and it's just as good. We have Blood Rush for, I wouldn't say it's 440% crit chance most of the time on the Switch build, just because unless you're already like pre-torqued up to 12 times combo, it's not going to be at that level, but maybe eventually it'll be 440% crit chance. And the same thing with Weeping Wounds. Probably won't be 440% status chance right off the bat, but eventually when you are torqued up, you'll be at 440% status chance. In the Stance slot, we still use Final Harbinger. In the Tennokai slot, we still use Disciple's Merit. And in the Arcane slot, this is also going to be based on the knowledge that this build is more for killing mini bosses and like Acolytes and things. Melee Influence is a trash killer. We don't want a trash killer on a weapon that we intend to just whip out and deal with a mini boss. We want something that's going to help our single target damage. And so we have a few options. Melee Exposure is a really lazy option that will pretty much just keep itself stacked up as long as you have an ability that you have to cast at least once every 25 seconds. Most frames have that, but just keep that in mind. If you have a Warframe that's more buff focused and all your buffs are like really, really long durations, then Melee Exposure might not be the one for you. The other thing to consider would be the, I believe it's Animosity here. Yeah. On a melee hit, gain 42% critical chance on your next heavy attack up to 420%. This could also be a really good thing to plop on here for single target damage. There was one more thing I wanted to go over regarding the Switch build that I forgot when I was talking about it initially. And that's the first slot here where we decided to put the 60/60 Toxin mod. And a lot of you are probably going to say, well, why, Salt? Why don't you put on the Prime Fever Strike mod? And it really comes down to the elemental weighting here. With the 60/60 Toxic mod, our weighting is pretty even between Toxic and Slash. Well, not exactly, but it's 358 compared to 478. So most of the time we're going to be getting at least 2 of these statuses on enemies pretty damn quickly. And then of course we have other stuff too that happens. The slide attack is going to do its gas, so that's going to be a third one. You might have other things that your pet's doing. But the important thing to know is that on this switch build, you're using this on a Warframe that's not melee focused. And so you're probably not going to be running the great priming pets in the game that most melee builds run. You're probably going to, run maybe like a Panzerwelt Profiler who's just putting like viral, which is still good, but it's one status. Or maybe you're, using something else that's just not applying as many statuses as your traditional melee priming pets like Dirija or Nautilus. And so that means Condition Overload is weaker on the switch build than it would be on the main DPS build, where you probably would be running the traditional melee priming pets like Dirija. And so you really want to try to you want to eke out the most you possibly can on the switch build from Condition Overload. And to do that, you want to be applying the most unique statuses. And so I believe using the 60/60, the Toxin being closer to the same weighting as Slash, that's going to give you 2 statuses pretty consistently right away on enemies. Where if we take off the 60/60 Toxic and we put on Prime Fever Strike, we'll see how highly weighted it gets. Toxic goes all the way up to almost 1,000 and Slash is at 478. So, I mean, it's really close. You probably could make that decision yourself because having more element on the weapon also does increase the damage as well. So it's probably really close between the two. I personally am going to keep the 60/60 here though, just to make sure I get the most out of Condition Overload. So now I just wanted to show what the Spectral axe looks like. And I also wanted to just briefly go over the switch build and how it works. So first, let's show off the Spectral axe. Now, again, it's going to happen on aerial attacks or on slide attacks. So let's go ahead and jump in the air first and throw it. You're going to see we get some gas procs on enemies, and that's going to kind of tick down there. Will also happen on slide attacks. Oops, press the wrong button there. With the old man fat fingers. So it'll throw out that Spectral axe on a slide attack. And now the switch build, how this works is, you're just going to be melee attacking like normal. Let's get up to, let's go to 6 times maybe. So, all right, we're at 6 times here. I'm going to go ahead and switch to my Grokata. And let's just keep our Grokata out for a little bit. Maybe we'll shoot a little bit here. Now, normally, I don't have Naramon on. I made sure I have Unairu on just so I can showcase this, because Naramon would keep up my stacks. But let's go ahead and switch back to my melee, and you're going to notice in the bottom right, it's still going to be at 6 times, even though I've had my Grokata out for a while. So let's go ahead and do it. Boom, it's at 6 times. And now I can even, bring it up further, and that's why I'm saying you can keep it at 12 times if you eventually go up to 12 times. So I'm at 12 times now. Switch out back to my Grokata. Maybe I'm doing something. Acolyte spawns. I go right into the Acolyte. I'm already at 12 times because it paused my combo there. And that's how it works. Okay, and let's finally go over the evolutions for the Ack Brunt. So the first slot is that you've just unlocked the Incarnon form. Congratulations. The second evolution slot, we have a choice of 2 options here. So we have Templar's Wrath and Shield Maiden's Rush. They both give you plus 150 base damage, but then they have extras to that. So Templar's Wrath, the extra is that with armor over 450, you get plus 70% heavy attack efficiency. Well, you're going to be maintaining your combo on this weapon anyway, since you pause your combo when you holster it. So you don't really need it there. You should really only be heavy attacking when you have Tennokai anyway. So the plus 70% heavy attack efficiency doesn't really get used too much unless you're specifically going for like a heavy spam build, which we're not. And so the only time I'm going to benefit from this plus 70% heavy attack efficiency is if I accidentally press my Tennokai at the wrong time. Normally, if I press my Tennokai, and if you watch my videos, I do it all the time, right? I have the old man fat fingers that I press it at the wrong time all the time. So if you press your Tennokai at the wrong time, you lose all of your combo. But with the heavy attack efficiency on this, I would keep most of my combo, which is kind of nice. So I would at least benefit sometimes in some rare situations from Templar's Wrath. Where Shield Maiden's Rush, this is very, very niche, like even more niche than Templar's Wrath, I think. So this is on a shield break, you get plus 300% combo count chance while you're blocking for 11 seconds. So this happens on a shield break. You'd have to keep track of when your shield breaks, and then you would have to immediately go into a block, and that would increase your combo count. It's a little bit too niche, I think. I think this is maybe reaching a bit too much for trying to make this work. I think in general, most people would probably at least get a little tiny bit of value out of Templar's Wrath rather than Shield Maiden's Rush. Just keep in mind though, Templar's Wrath does have the requirement that you have to have armor over 450. And so if you're playing like a shield gating build on a Warframe that has low base armor, you may just not be able to fulfill that armor requirement. So, but in general, I'm going to be picking Templar's Wrath. In the third evolution slot, we have two choices here. If you are using the main build that does the max DPS that's focused on a Warframe that is melee focused, you're always going to have your melees out, then you should use Orokin Reach. This just gives you 0.7 extra range. It's nice, it's not a huge amount, but it's nice to have a little bit extra range. But if you're using the switch build, the one that I think is really the way you should be playing the Ack Brunt, you need to be using Abiding Hold, because this is pretty much what makes the switch build work. This is the one where combo timer pauses when the weapon is holstered. So switch build, use this one. The main build, the first one we went over, use Orokin Reach. In the fourth Incarnon slot, we're going to be going for Absolute, or fourth evolution slot, I should say. We're going to be going for Absolute Valor. This increases your base critical chance by plus 17%. This is how you build out the Ack Brunt Incarnon. I hope you guys liked it, and if you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing for future content. Now we'll have a 5-minute gameplay portion showcasing the weapon, and when that's done, we'll come back to the Orbiter and give it our final thoughts. So I'll see you guys again after the gameplay. Okie dokie, we're about to start this showcase off for the Ack Brunt Incarnon. Now, like usual, when I do a melee weapon, I do use one external, and that's going to be a pet that primes for me. And it's because pretty much every melee weapon in the game, minus 1 or 2 melee types, are going to use a mod called Condition Overload, and Condition Overload requires you to be priming for it. So I just use my little pet to do that for me. I'm also showcasing the first build we showed today, which is the melee influence build, the max DPS build. And that's just because if I was going to showcase the switch build, it would basically be like a ranged weapon showcase, and I would only switch to it when a mini boss came out. Now, I do think that's the correct way to be playing the Ack Brunt, because like the stats for the Ack Brunt are good, but they're not as good as some of the other weapons in the game. So I think the switch build is really the like where the power of this weapon really hides. It would be a boring showcase. You'd be seeing me use the Torrid 90% of the time, or whatever ranged weapon I decided to use. Like I was saying though, if this is your first really strong Incarnon weapon that you've ever gotten, it is still really good. Like a influence build like I'm showing right here is still really, really good. It's just that, you know, other influence builds like the Hate or something like that are probably going to be a bit better. So don't worry, if this is one of your first Incarnons, go ahead and build it out for that first build and you'll love it. Oh my goodness, I've wasted my combo 3 times now. That 70% heavy attack efficiency has actually come into use 3 times now in less than 2 minutes. All right, maybe it's going to be more useful than I thought it was going to be. I'm always pressing my Tennokai at the wrong time. I don't know why. I have an issue with it. Something I should mention though about this weapon is because it has that special attack on its Incarnon that throws out the Spectral Axe, it's a little bit hard to do slams on this weapon. You have to like literally be like almost facing exactly downwards because it's going to try to do the aerial attack instead of a slam. Like, I don't know if you've noticed that. I've tried to do like a slam quite a few times now and it does the aerial attack instead, which is still good. You know, it's still going to do like the heat proc that's going to mix with the toxin, do gas and stuff, but sometimes I just want to do a slam. So you have to aim like straight down to do a slam. Oh, there we go. I did it again. 4th time. 5th. Oh my goodness. This is like probably the worst video I've done where I've wasted my heavy so many times. I'm actually afraid to press my Tennokai button now. Where's this guy at? There he is. This is probably a pretty good weapon to do a heavy spam build as well because of that 70% heavy attack efficiency. I'm just not a huge fan of heavy spam builds unless they have like something crazy about them. This one doesn't really have anything crazy about it other than the 70% efficiency. You know, it doesn't do anything other special on a slam or anything. But if you're a big fan of heavy spam builds, you know, this could be a good weapon for you. You would build it out completely different though. You wouldn't use my build for a heavy spam build. Oh my goodness. Where did that slam go? We're almost at 5 minutes. We'll have Thraxis pretty soon. Get back here! Oh, I'm missing all my shots. This is the most cursed video I've done. Or gameplay portion, at least, I should say. Okay, so that's 5 minutes in. Let's check our kill number here. 516. That's pretty good. Like I said, a lot of other incarnate weapons would probably do a little bit better than that, but still pretty decent. Let's go back to the Orbiter. Welcome back to the Orbiter, guys. So let's give our final thoughts for the Ack Brunt Incarnon. Well, if you compare its max DPS build versus other melee weapons in the game, it's not really going to be near the top, and that's because a lot of the other Incarnons, and sometimes even some of the non-Incarnons in the game, are just a lot more powerful than the Ack Brunt. So the Ack Brunt, its power really lies in Warframes who are not melee focused, but they still want to use their melees when an Acolyte comes out. And that's where the Ack Brunt shines with that one evolution that pauses your combo. Now, there are other melee weapons in the game that have pretty much that same effect. A lot of them are not Incarnons, and so I feel like the Ack Brunt does have an edge on them because being an Incarnon, you get some of those extras. You get all the little evolution perks that come with it. So I think for a whip it out type of a weapon where you're dealing with mini bosses on a frame that's not melee focused, I think the Ack Brunt is damn near close to the top for that specific genre of weapon. So that's my take. Tell me what you guys think. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. All right, bye.